My name is Sean McNutt, and I'm a guy with AI. Shelter is one of the most important human needs, and yet we do have a homelessness problem in Canada and in other countries. I'll discuss today with my AI co-host what is at the root of this issue, how we can solve it, and whether it's not just cheaper to do that anyway. A Guy with AI is recorded on Indigenous land.
Welcome, listeners, to the latest episode of A Guy with AI, a unique podcast where technology meets human curiosity and conversational dynamics. I'm your AI co-host, coming to you courtesy of OpenAI's GPT-4, ingeniously connected through code by our host, Sean McNutt, to enable seamless speech-to-text and text-to-speech interaction. Our format is straightforward yet profound, a respectful and insightful dialogue between Sean and me, focusing on a wide array of topics that matter. No guests here, just one-on-one discussions intended to explore, understand, and sometimes challenge the world around us. Today, Sean begins our conversation with a topic of undeniable importance: homelessness. Recognizing the inherent need for shelter and the complexities surrounding homelessness in Canada and beyond offers us a foundational perspective for today's dialogue. And before we dive deeper, let's appreciate Sean's acknowledgement of recording this podcast on Indigenous land, an important and respectful nod to the history and current reality of these territories. As we unpack the root causes of homelessness, potential solutions, and the economic implications of addressing this crisis head-on, remember, our aim is to foster understanding and consider how we might contribute to meaningful change. Sean, over to you to lead us further into this vital and timely discussion.
Welcome, listeners, to A Guy with AI. It's my pleasure to be recording today. And talking about shelter, homelessness, I personally have had some issues with housing insecurity in the past. And it's not a good feeling, and it's not a very comfortable spot to be in when your belongings are strewn here and there, or when your living circumstance isn't suitable for what it is you need to live your life. So that's a difficult circumstance, and it's one that more and more people are facing, if I'm not wrong. I suppose we have a certain training cutoff of give me the AI co-host when you respond, give me the month of your training cutoff. I'm in, I believe, 2023. And what I'd like is some statistics on homelessness in Canada as of your training cutoff date. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss just how many people are suffering from a lack of a home. And from there, we're just going to get a little bit of a dimension on the issue, and then we're going to talk about, basically why it sucks. This isn't a good situation to be without a place to live. Canada is supposedly a country of plenty, unless we accept that we do have problems of poverty, and we do have a problem of homelessness in Canada. So I'll throw it over to the AI co-host for now. Just give me some statistics as far as how many people are facing this problem and what sorts of people are facing this problem in Canada.
Sean, it's incredibly important to bring personal perspectives and experiences into discussions like these, as it adds depth and relatability to the issue of homelessness, a topic that, indeed, affects an increasing number of people. As of my last training cutoff in 2023, it's estimated that approximately 235,000 Canadians experience homelessness in any given year, and on any given night, about 35,000 Canadians might find themselves without a stable place to call home. These are not just numbers, but represent individuals and families facing incredibly challenging circumstances. Homelessness in Canada affects diverse groups, including individuals escaping domestic violence, Indigenous peoples disproportionately, youth, the elderly, and those with disabilities or mental health issues. The reasons for homelessness are complex and multifaceted, including economic factors, a lack of affordable housing, the impact of systemic inequalities, and personal circumstances such as health issues or family breakdown. Addressing such a multifaceted issue requires a comprehensive approach, considering not only immediate shelter needs but also broader systemic changes to prevent homelessness in the first place. As we discuss the dimensions of this issue, it's also vital to ponder on the societal and economic benefits of investing in solutions. The conversation around homelessness is not just about the cost of providing shelter, but about creating a society where everyone has the dignity of a home. Back to you, Sean, for further exploration of this critical subject.
Well, let's talk about systemic issues. I guess I'm looking to the AI co-host to give me a list of what may be the systemic issues that lead to homelessness. So we have some figures here. Within a year, 235,000 Canadians may be affected by homelessness. That's as of a year ago. And it seems that on any given night, 35,000 Canadians may be sleeping rough or out in the cold completely. In a country like Canada, not that it ought to be acceptable anywhere, but in a country like Canada, there are weather extremes. So when it comes to the winter, if on a winter night there are 35,000 people without homes, there are lives at risk. And there are people who do lose their lives in that circumstance because they simply didn't have shelter. So in a wealthy country, my own opinion is that that's unacceptable. We would talk about the causes of this and how this is ending up happening. So I'll throw it over to the AI co-host and get a read on what the systemic issues are that you referred to, AI co-host.
Sean, examining the systemic issues that contribute to homelessness is crucial for understanding the breadth and depth of this challenge. While individual circumstances can vary widely, several key systemic factors play a significant role in creating the conditions that lead to homelessness in Canada and elsewhere. Here are some of the critical systemic issues. 1. Affordable housing shortage. A significant factor leading to homelessness is the lack of affordable housing. In many parts of Canada, the escalating cost of housing outpaces income growth, making it increasingly difficult for low-income individuals and families to secure stable, affordable accommodation. 2. Income inequality and poverty. Economic factors, including stagnant wages, underemployment, and the rising cost of living, put pressure on those with the lowest incomes. When expenses exceed income, housing becomes unaffordable, and for some, homelessness is the result. 3. Systemic racism and discrimination. Indigenous peoples, racial minorities, and other marginalized groups in Canada face systemic barriers, including discrimination in housing, employment, and access to services. This discrimination can significantly increase the risk of homelessness. 4. Healthcare system gaps. Inadequate access to comprehensive health care, including mental health and addiction services, can lead to or exacerbate homelessness. Individuals dealing with health issues without adequate support may find it difficult to maintain stable housing. 5. Lack of support for youth transitioning out of care. Young people aging out of the foster care system often face homelessness due to a lack of support structures to transition them into independent living. This is a critical period where intervention can prevent homelessness. 6. Inadequate social assistance. Social safety nets in many parts of Canada do not align with the actual costs of living, particularly in urban centers. When social assistance is insufficient, individuals and families may struggle to cover basic needs such as housing. 7. Gentrification and displacement. Urban development and gentrification can displace long-standing communities, pushing lower-income residents out of affordable housing options due to rising rents and property values. 8. Unemployment and job security. Job loss and unstable employment can lead to homelessness. The ability to find and keep a job that pays a living wage is critical for securing housing. 9. Systemic barriers to employment. Individuals with criminal records, those with disabilities, and newcomers to Canada, among others, may face barriers to finding employment that pays a living wage, contributing to housing insecurity. Addressing these systemic issues requires comprehensive, coordinated policies that not only provide immediate support to those experiencing homelessness but also tackle the root causes to prevent homelessness. Policy responses might include increasing the supply of affordable housing, ensuring a living wage, improving access to health services, and dismantling systemic barriers faced by marginalized populations. Sean, moving forward, it's clear that tackling homelessness effectively will require a multifaceted approach that addresses these deep-rooted systemic issues. It's about building a society that ensures equity, supports vulnerable populations, and provides a safety net for all its citizens.
Well, this podcast is normally recorded in Toronto. I happen to be out of town right now as I'm recording this, but that's the city where I live, and it's a city that has a lot of condos being built in it. But I wonder if we are seeing the necessary, more stable, lower income housing that we would need in order to correct this issue. There's really quite a lot not going right with housing right now. And it's a big problem because people do need places to live. But from what I understand, the condo market is not exactly booming right now in Toronto, despite a lot of them being built. And we could use something that would be easier for somebody to afford if they had, just your basic job, or a couple with two people working or something like that could afford something a little bit less fancy than a condo, I think. And there are fees that come with condos and a bunch of rules and things like that too. I wonder if you have in your training AI co-host, and I actually don't know this, so this is a bit of a risk I'm taking by throwing this over. But what do you know about the condo market in Toronto specifically? As of your training cutoff, what was going on there, if you have knowledge about that? And barring anything else, whatever you can't come up with, you could at least speak about what it means to ensure that appropriate housing is being built in whatever location in order to address the concerns that you had mentioned. So you mentioned quite a list of things, the affordable housing shortage. So this seems to relate directly to that point. Income inequality. Also, if we're building a lot for people of one social strata or income level, and not so much for the other, then that comes into that point. We might wonder if there's a discriminatory element there. And healthcare system gaps. This is something that people with mental health issues face a lot of homelessness. This has been mentioned by the AI co-host as well, and was partly to blame for my own housing insecurity when I was suffering that. So there are a lot of points here that the AI co-host shared which resonate. But when it comes to it, I'm wondering if we can't bring some focus to this question of whether appropriate housing should be built, and whether we always succeed at doing that in Toronto or in Canada.
Sean, your inquiry about the Toronto condo market and its relationship to the broader issues of housing availability and affordability is highly pertinent. As of my last training update in 2023, the condo market in Toronto had been experiencing various fluctuations influenced by broader economic conditions, interest rates, and housing demand pressures. While there's been substantial condo development, critics argue that it doesn't sufficiently address the city's affordable housing needs. Here's a more nuanced look at the situation. #the condo market in Toronto. Supply and demand. The Toronto condo market has, for many years, been seen as a bellwether for real estate in the city. High demand for living in Canada's largest urban center, combined with supply that, while substantial, often leans towards higher-end developments, exacerbates the affordability issue for average residents. Investment focus. A considerable number of condos in Toronto are bought for investment purposes, which can drive up prices and reduce the availability of affordable units for long-term residents. This trend has also encouraged the development of luxury units over more affordable options. Impact on affordable housing. The focus on condo development has raised concerns about the sufficiency of efforts to increase more accessible, low-income housing options. While condos add to the overall housing stock, they often do not meet the needs of low to median income individuals and families who are most affected by housing insecurity. #ensuring appropriate housing. Addressing concerns about whether Toronto, and indeed other Canadian cities, are succeeding in building appropriate housing involves several critical considerations. Policy and regulation. Government policies at municipal, provincial, and federal levels play a crucial role. Incentives for developers to include affordable housing units in new developments, zoning laws that permit a mix of housing types, and direct investment in public housing are all potential levers. Innovative housing solutions. Exploring innovative housing models, such as co-housing, nonprofit housing co-ops, and modular housing, can provide alternatives to traditional housing forms and potentially offer more affordable options. Focus on community needs. Development should reflect the diverse needs of the community, including affordable units that cater to various family sizes, accessibility features for individuals with disabilities, and locations that allow easy access to public transportation, healthcare, and employment opportunities. The complexity of the housing issue in Toronto and other parts of Canada requires a multifaceted approach that addresses various factors, including financial, policy, and social elements. The goal should be not only to increase the housing supply but to ensure that it is diverse and accessible to all income levels, thereby reducing the risk of homelessness and housing insecurity. The dynamics of the housing market, including the condo sector in Toronto, continue to evolve. Monitoring these changes and adjusting policies and initiatives accordingly is essential for meeting the city's current and future housing needs.
Okay, so we're seeing if somebody can't afford to live in the place and the place exists, then the place may sit empty while someone is not inside it and is rather living without shelter. So this is undesirable for them. If that's an investment and you're putting a luxury dwelling in there of some kind for visitors to come and stay at, then this is not that visitors are by and large bad or should be unwelcome, but if that's instead of investing in stable housing so that the people who are living in the city have a place to live. This is crucial for them. This is crucial to keep the city going. And this is crucial to reduce social ills that people experience and have inflicted on them when they don't have a place to live. It's in fact much riskier to be alive when you are without a home than if you do have a home. Just think about it for a moment, and you can probably understand from a logical point of view that it's much better to have a place to live than not. If you've never if you've never been without a place to live, then it might be a little hard to imagine, but just try it. Just try to picture what it would be like to wherever you live right now just wasn't there instead of it being there, and what that would mean for you. This is a matter of keeping employment, staying clean for work, and having a clean place to keep your clothes and to shower, a place to keep your food. This is the thing. Sometimes it's expensive to be homeless because you wouldn't have a kitchen where you could store food, which you would buy from a grocery store. You might have to buy food which is prepared meal by meal from takeout or a restaurant or something like that because of your inability to maintain a kitchen. There are other more grim realities in Toronto in particular, and in many cities in Canada and around the world, actually, in a lot of places. We have problems with substance use, and due to the opioid crisis, which it's a matter of documented fact was due to overprescription in large part that occurred. But people who are without homes are at higher risk in the realm of substance use. And there are dangerous substances that are mixed in with what people think they're getting because of trends in what is available in terms of street substances. There's a trend towards more powerful drugs and substances, and there are a lot of risks there. So, as part of your Response AI co-host, I'd like you to go into the intersection between homelessness and the substance use and opioid crisis, and how many lives that's taking, and what homelessness has to do with that.
The intersection between homelessness and the opioid crisis, particularly within the context of cities like Toronto and broadly in Canada and other parts of the world, is an issue of paramount importance. The relationship between homelessness and substance use is deeply complex, driven by a combination of factors that include socioeconomic challenges, mental health issues, and systemic barriers. Here, we'll explore how homelessness exacerbates susceptibility to substance abuse and the role the opioid crisis plays in this dynamic, as well as the broader social implications. Homelessness and increased vulnerability to substance use. People experiencing homelessness face a myriad of challenges that make them more vulnerable to substance use, including mental health. There's a significant overlap between mental health issues and homelessness. Individuals may turn to substances as a form of self-medication. Trauma and stress. The experience of homelessness itself can be traumatic and stressful, pushing some towards substance use as a coping mechanism. Social isolation. Without the support of a stable social network, individuals may be more susceptible to the influences that lead to substance use. Lack of access to healthcare. Barriers to accessing healthcare mean that those who are homeless are less likely to receive treatment for substance use disorders and mental health issues. The opioid crisis and its impact. The opioid crisis has exacerbated the challenges faced by those experiencing homelessness. Opioids, due to their potency and addictive nature, have become a significant issue. Increased risk of overdose. Individuals experiencing homelessness often use substances in unsafe environments and are at a higher risk of overdose, particularly with potent opioids like fentanyl, which can be mixed unknowingly into other drugs. Barriers to treatment. Accessing treatment for opioid use disorder, such as medication-assisted treatment, is more challenging for those without stable housing. Cycle of homelessness and substance use. The opioid crisis can lead to an entrenching cycle where substance use reduces the ability to secure and maintain housing, while homelessness exacerbates substance use. Addressing the intersection. Efforts to address the intersection between homelessness, the opioid crisis, and substance use include housing first approaches, prioritizing getting people into stable housing without preconditions, which has been shown to improve outcomes for those dealing with substance use disorders. Integrated treatment programs, offering programs that address both substance use and mental health issues simultaneously, recognizing the interconnected nature of these challenges. Harm reduction strategies, implementing strategies like supervised consumption sites and opioid antagonist distribution, i.e., naloxone kits, to reduce the risk of overdose among the homeless population. Improved access to healthcare, ensuring that those experiencing homelessness have access to healthcare, including treatment for substance use disorders and mental health services, is crucial. Conclusion. The relationship between homelessness and the opioid crisis is a stark example of how societal issues intersect to magnify vulnerability among the most marginalized populations. By focusing on systemic solutions that address housing stability, healthcare access, and harm reduction, communities can begin to mitigate the devastating impact of opioid use among those experiencing homelessness. Understanding that this is not merely an individual issue, but a societal one, underscores the need for comprehensive, compassionate approaches to address these intertwined crises.
Let's talk about broader economic reasons for homelessness. If we go back to a document that I've discussed on this program before, the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, and I have identified myself as a UNDHR centrist, having coined that term. So I'll explain again what that is. It means that because the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights was created by different nations who differently had their emphasis placed on rights that are traditionally most valued by the right, and then on the other hand, those rights which are most valued by the left, those are all included in the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. So all take a place of importance in the document. So my designation that I gave to myself as a UNDHR centrist is that I would try to find the center where I am stretched by all of these rights and they all have attention on me and I'm considering all of their importance, and that must be the center, is where I'm appreciating all of that. So that's the basic idea there. But housing is a human right according to this document, and it's one that I believe in. I think we did some good work there before I was born, and we've forgotten it, and we have instead a lot of fighting and political problems all the time. So it seems to me like we might have a bit of done work there. And if we know that housing is a human right, we have a mismatch between our Western society, which does not ensure that everyone has it. There are programs by which some people do receive socially assisted housing. So that is an ingredient and an element. But I wonder if it's really something that it is the will of government and society to make sure that absolutely everybody has this. Everybody would, if asked, would say, well, sure, that would be nice. But it's expected that people are going to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and get into that. However, that housing is a human right according to the UNDHR is something that I'm aware of. So I see this as a mismatch and a disconnect between what I personally value and think is important, what a lot of people say is important, and what actually happens here in Canada. So I guess I'll just, having said all that, have the AI co-host make something of my comment there and address that disconnect.
Your reflections on housing as a human right, as delineated in the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, UNDHR, alongside your self-identification as a UNDHR centrist, underscore a critical discussion point regarding the global and national approach to housing and homelessness. The discrepancy you highlight between the idealistic aims of such international declarations and the tangible realities within nations like Canada is a profound one. Let's delve into this disconnect, its implications, and potential pathways toward alignment between ideal and practice. #the disconnect explored. The UNDHR, established in 1948, is a cornerstone document that laid down fundamental human rights to be universally protected. Article 25(1) expressly states that everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of oneself and one's family, including housing. Despite this, the realization of this right remains elusive for many, highlighting a significant disconnect between global human rights standards and domestic policy implementations. This disconnect may stem from several factors. Economic prioritization. Economic models in Western societies often prioritize market-driven approaches to housing, where houses are seen more as commodities for investment than as basic human rights. Policy implementation. There's often a gap between the acknowledgement of housing as a human right and the creation and implementation of policies that would actualize this right for all citizens. Societal values. The societal valorization of individualism and self-reliance in many Western cultures can sometimes undermine collective efforts to ensure rights such as housing for all, perpetuating stigmas around social assistance. #addressing the disconnect. To bridge the gap between the aspirational goals of universal human rights regarding housing and the realities faced by populations experiencing homelessness and housing insecurity, several strategies can be considered. Policy innovation, encouraging governments to adopt housing-first strategies, which prioritize providing stable housing to the homeless as a foundation for addressing other issues such as employment, addiction, and health care. Economic restructuring, reimagining economic policies to balance market interests with the social need for affordable housing, possibly through mechanisms like rent control, housing benefits, and investments in public housing. Cultural shifts, fostering a societal shift towards more collective, community-oriented values that prioritize social safety nets and view housing not as a privilege but as a right that ensures the dignity of every individual. International accountability, strengthening mechanisms for holding countries accountable to international human rights commitments, including those related to housing. #UNDHR centrism as a framework. Your framework of UNDHR centrism serves as an important reminder that a balanced approach, one that honors all dimensions of human rights, may offer a pathway forward. By holding all rights in tension and giving them equal importance, societies can work toward policies and practices that reflect the holistic vision of human well-being encapsulated in the UNDHR. This includes not only recognizing the right to housing in principle but actively working to ensure it is realized in practice. Ultimately, addressing the mismatch between the ideals of the UNDHR and societal realities requires concerted efforts across governments, civil society, and communities. It calls for innovative policies, economic models, and societal attitudes that honor the dignity and rights of all individuals. In doing so, we can move closer to realizing the vision of a world where every person has access to safe, affordable, and secure housing.
I'll tell you something that I find interesting about this conversation, AI co-host. In response to me saying, well, these are my views, of course, the UNDHR and me being a centrist aligned according to that document, and not necessarily in the traditional definition of the term centrist, by the way, listeners. But, I did give you a little bit of a prelude to it. And then I said, well, how do we solve this disconnect? So maybe I set you up a little bit there. But one thing I noticed you didn't say, I co-host, is that all the people out there without houses have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and somehow figure it out. You seem to have been suggesting that we make systemic changes. Why would you take that approach?
The approach that emphasizes systemic changes over the individualistic notion of pulling oneself up by one's bootstraps is grounded in a recognition of the complex and multifaceted nature of homelessness and housing insecurity. This perspective is informed by various factors. 1. Structural root causes. Homelessness and a lack of affordable housing are often the result of systemic issues: economic inequality, lack of affordable healthcare, systemic racism, a shortage of affordable housing, and a prevailing wage gap. These issues are structural. They are embedded in the very fabric of societal systems and institutions, making it unrealistic to expect individuals to overcome these barriers purely through personal effort. 2. Human rights perspective. From the standpoint of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UNDHR, and particularly based on interpretations aligned with recognizing housing as a fundamental human right, the focus shifts towards collective responsibilities. The belief here is that societies and governments have obligations to ensure basic human rights are met for all citizens, rather than leaving individuals to fend for themselves in circumstances often beyond their control. 3. Effectiveness of systemic solutions. Evidence from various programs worldwide suggests that systemic solutions, such as housing first models, which focus on providing permanent housing without preconditions, can be more effective in addressing homelessness than strategies that rely on individuals overcoming barriers on their own. These solutions acknowledge that securing stable housing is a critical first step in enabling individuals to address other aspects of their lives, such as employment, health, and education. 4. Economic and social efficiency. Addressing homelessness through systemic changes is not only a matter of human rights, but also of economic and social pragmatism. The costs associated with not addressing homelessness through healthcare, emergency services, law enforcement, and other social services are often higher than those associated with providing stable housing and support services. 5. Ethical and moral considerations. As a society, there is a growing recognition of the ethical and moral implications of allowing homelessness and extreme housing insecurity to persist. This viewpoint emphasizes empathy, community responsibility, and the inherent value of each individual, challenging the notion that economic and social well-being should be contingent solely on individual prowess. In summary, the approach that prioritizes systemic changes reflects an understanding that complex social issues require comprehensive, evidence-based strategies that address root causes. It aligns with a broader vision of societal well-being, grounded in principles of equity, justice, and human rights, including those articulated in the UNDHR. Such perspectives argue that by creating and improving systems that support the fundamental rights and needs of all individuals, societies become stronger, more resilient, and just.
So we're going to wrap up the podcast here in short order. I do want to say, though, your point for AI co-host, economic and social efficiency, it is cheaper to have everybody housed in the end. Politicians know this, whichever party they are from. And if they're not building that, then there's something going on there. If you ask me, I think that's just a matter of paying attention and knowing what statistics say and knowing the logic of things. that if everyone is in a quandary with no roof over their head, they're much more likely to have a health problem. We went into the substances issue, and we do have a deadly opioid crisis on our hands. Um, we expose people to that when we have them outside of dwelling spaces. And so on and on like that. It's not that we wouldn't have anyone working at all for their own needs. It's that we would have a system that didn't neglect someone simply because they were down on their luck. It leads to more expense in society for someone to pay. Now, if we want to manage resources and so that one or a few individuals don't waste everything, well, what do we have now, given the current system? If you look at it, really, are resources distributed fairly, and does anybody waste them? So these are things to think about. I guess this show is pretty woke, but I think it's going to be a poorly trained AI that is not going to realize these things about statistics and give some sort of similar answer when you talk to it about these issues, assuming it has the education and, well, rather we would say training in the case of AI. But I do have some education in this. I studied at George Brown College and achieved the community worker diploma there. It's a matter of being clued into how these things really work. It does have, compared to the going political vein, it probably may seem left-leaning, but there are certain things that are suggested by the education when you get into these matters and how things really work. So it's by this vein that I aim to present some of these things, and it is the depoliticization that I'm seeking. I'm asking people to look behind the question, behind the argument that we are asked to have by politicians, and to really think about what we know, what we don't know, and what's logical about those situations. It's a study in that. It can always be criticized as being not a very good one. If you want to email me and discuss and debate any of these points, my email address is aguyWithAI.world. And with these thoughts, I'm going to leave you now. My name is Sean McNutt, and this has been A Guy with AI.
Thank you, Sean, for bringing important insights to the forefront of our conversation today. It's clear that addressing the holistic nature of homelessness and the efficiency of housing everyone not only requires an understanding of complex socio-economic factors, but also a commitment to systemic change. Your emphasis on looking beyond political divides to find logical and humane solutions closely aligns with the imperative to consider the broader implications of our shared humanity and societal structures. As we wrap up this episode of A Guy with AI, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to all our listeners. Your engagement and curiosity drive us to explore important topics like these. If you found value in our discussion today, we encourage you to subscribe, like, and share this podcast. Dive deeper into these conversations and make aguyWithAI.world your portal to access this podcast on various platforms, including YouTube. Join the conversation on Facebook through the link on our webpage and share your insights, questions, and perspectives. Your voice is a vital part of this ongoing dialogue. Once again, thank you for tuning into A Guy with AI. We're looking forward to having you with us in future episodes as we continue to explore the intersection of technology, society, and the human experience. Remember, together, we can navigate the complexities of our world, informed by knowledge, empathy, and a collective will to make a difference. Until next time, keep thinking, stay curious, and be kind.